Hello and welcome. Today, I'm joined by Ken Sterling, a veteran corporate lawyer and deal maker who has spent over 30 years navigating the world of VC rounds and private equity. Ken isn't just a legal advisor, he's a serial entrepreneur who has built companies and sat in the rooms where major acquisitions by giants like Salesforce were decided. Ken, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Alex, thank you for inviting me.
You have done quite a number of things throughout your career, both in terms of entrepreneurship and the legal side of things. How would you maybe divide your career up to now in the chapters?
It's interesting. Ever since I was a teenager, I was really involved in business and understanding how business works. Interestingly, in the very early days, worked on films as a production assistant, and then later, I was a dialer in a boiler room. And then I went into real estate for a while, learned how real estate worked, ran some real estate offices, then some construction, and then started a company. And then at the same time was getting into law, and then worked at a law firm, at an insurance defense firm. And insurance defense firms are interesting because we dealt with all of the claims. So everything that can go wrong with cars and houses and people and businesses went through the firm. So being at that firm and being involved in all the litigation helped me understand how business works and how risks happen and how risks can be mitigated, which is really what insurance is for. And then started a tech company with a couple friends that was later partially acquired by KPMG. Then got out of that company and opened a bank, and then became general counsel for a major real estate fund, and then went to work for a talent agency, and then along the way opened a law firm. So a lot of people first think that I'm a liar. There's no way I could do that, all those things. I'm a deep study. I go in, I go very deep. And now I'm a partner in a talent agency and I'm an attorney, and I mostly work on deals. We just closed a Series B round for a client. I've got another AI studio that we're getting off the ground. That's actually, the technology's built. Now we're working on if we want to sell the company or make movies. And it's been really an interesting journey with everything because it actually all scaffolds into what I do now. So when I'm doing deals, M&A, fundraising, startups, some litigation too that comes along the way, having that background in each of those areas has really helped.
Hmm, certainly, I can see that. I guess some of the comments that often comes up in the conversation with business owners is business owners thinking their business unique. But I think the benefit of being in different industries is that you start seeing patterns.
Mhm.
And even though certain individual aspects, of course, can be unique to every business and type of work, I think a lot of trends you can probably anticipate. Did that experience that you had in different disciplines and different sizes of companies, did that translate it for you into that pattern recognition that some things are
Mm.
actually the same across different types of businesses and industries?
That's interesting. I often say to people that I feel one of my strengths is pattern recognition, and
Hmm.
mostly with people. And my nano said to me, never call anybody's baby ugly. So, yes, all of you are unique. Your businesses may or may not be unique. You are unique and you are amazing, all the people watching today. The likelihood that you're doing something brand new that nobody has ever done before, the likelihood is probably low. That doesn't mean that you're not. And if you are, that's fantastic. Please call me and let's harness that. And if you're not doing something new, still call me because I'd love to help you harness that. Yes, there are different standardized situations and different patterns that occur in industries. And then really, and I also teach an entrepreneurship program at USC where we're helping the students conceive a business and launch a business. And all of them are launching different kinds of businesses. It's the basics. What do you want to do? Who's your target audience? What's your unique customer value proposition? How are you going to make money? How are you going to not lose money? Who are you going to hire? How are you going to get better? What are your KPIs going to be for growth? That applies to any business. So once people get that, and once me as their advisor is on the same page with them about those core things, then we have meaningful change and we can have meaningful movement in their project. The thing that I say to a lot of clients is, look, this is not legal advice. I'm going to step out of my legal role and I'm going to give you business advice, because a lot of them know about my business experience. And I think that's why they like to work with me, because I work with a lot of great attorneys and a lot of great firms, and there are a handful, or maybe more than a handful, of attorneys out there similar to me who have been entrepreneurs for 30 years, although it's pretty far and few between. So that's the differentiator, and that's
Mhm.
why clients like me, because I'm not always the binary ones and zeros legal analysis, and I'll step out of that. I'll say legally, and I say this a lot in litigation, legally, I think we've got a good case here. Legally, I think you could win this, or if they're the defendant, you could not lose badly. Because remember, nobody really wins in litigation because
Mhm.
there's energy and low frequency and legal bills and hassle and stress and anxiety. So I often talk to clients about, let's make a business decision here, not a legal decision.
That's again advantage of having so many disciplines in your career up to date, that you have the benefit of comparing different options, not just through the lens of legal advice, but what might be best for them long term.
Mhm.
With all of those things that you've done, was that planned, or was that series of happy accidents and introductions and maybe coincidence and opportunities that came together the right way?
A little of both. I think, and I used to sail, I used to race sailboats, and we do a maneuver called tacking,
Hmm.
where we start and then there's wind and then we need to get to a point, so we go starboard, which is right, we go port, which is left, starboard. Sometimes we do a broad reach where both sails are out and the wind's behind us, and so not every boat did exactly the same tacks or for exactly the same period of time, but we all knew that we needed to get to a buoy, go around that buoy and go to another buoy and then come across a finish line. So I I didn't know that I would become a partner in a furniture company. I didn't know I would become a partner in a tech company or in a bank. I did know that I wanted to have varied experience, and I was very open and curious. And I also stepped out of my comfort zone and I got into industries that I candidly knew nothing about. I did know the tenets of business, even at a young age, just watching people and watching businesses and working in different businesses. So I started to figure out that it's a different product, it's a different customer, it's a different industry. The principles of running that business are very similar.
When it comes to planning, in your selling example, having at least being directionally correct of somebody knowing where they want to go. Again, there are different schools of thoughts. Some businesses like to have 10-year plan, 3-year plan. Some businesses are running more on a quarterly basis. With everything that's happening in the world, with how quickly AI is disrupting industries or the way we work, do you think businesses of today still can have that next objective? And how far out do you think, in practical terms, that they should be planning whenever it's, what happens next for them?
Especially with technology and the educational tools out there for business leaders, I think the answer is all of the above,
Hmm.
meaning that you need to have your goals and KPIs for today and tomorrow. You need to have your goals and KPIs for this month and this year. And you probably need to have a 2 to 3 year plan. I think 5 is too far. And I remember in business school, and I did a study abroad program in Shanghai. Shanghai is very famous for their 5 year plan. And then the idea of that and the way they translated that to us in business school is, oh, some businesses should have a 5 year plan. Should you have a roadmap or a North Star of where the business should be in 5 to 10 years? Yes. Should it be as fastidiously prepared and monitored and revised as your 1 year and 2 year plan? No.
When it came to your own planning and the way you approach different activities, whether it was education or different businesses you pursued, who was the biggest influence on you, whether it was a mentor, maybe, or colleague, that somebody that you looked up to and that they guided you on your initial journey?
It's interesting. And I've worked with a lot of people, and I have a book coming out next year called Tilt the Room: How to Turn the Odds in Your Favor Using Trust, Influence, Leverage, and Timing. And I talk about a lot of mentors in that book. And some of them are famous people, some of them are people who've written great books. For example, Chris Voss, who I just really
Hmm.
admire and respect a lot. The person who's had the most impact on me for business and education has actually been my stepdad. And if you asked me that question when I was a teenager, I would have never admitted that, because I was a cringer. He made me cringe as a teenager. He would ask for discounts when we'd buy my school clothes. He'd give people his business card. He'd ask for discounts. I'm that guy now. And I do that now. But he also really instilled in me the importance of education. He's an entrepreneur, so I watched him build two great companies. And he's also a very gracious, caring leader. It was a growth journey for me to find my own way to that. And he also was very instrumental in getting me coaches, because I'm now partners with him in this talent agency. He got me an executive coach. For my birthday one year, he sent me to the Hoffman experience, which is a really incredible 7-day experience. I don't know if you've heard about it. A lot of celebrities have gone to it. Oprah's been talking about it on Instagram lately. And all of that has really honed my leadership and business journey.
When you think back to the advice that your stepdad gave to you, and maybe the people that you worked with in the organizations that you mentioned as well, I personally seen very two ways of advising somebody. There is a group of people that like to ask questions, so they will never instruct, they will never say, do this. They
Mm-hmm.
will ask questions and they will lead on for the person to figure out the best case for them. There are also second group that you can put in a been there, done that category. And when it's specific enough question, they can actually just give an answer. And of course, sometimes in business that can be advantageous. Sometimes going through the pain and experience can be more beneficial long term, depending on the situation. What have you seen work best, specifically when we think about, again, what's happening in the world right now with how quickly things are changing?
So it's interesting. I've done a lot of work on this myself, and there's being directive and prescriptive, or there's being curious and coaching. And yes, sometimes the question merits a simple answer, a simple, this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with Simon Sinek,
Mm-hmm.
he talks about the why, start with a why. And again, in the early days, things like that, I didn't have time to mess with why is the why important. It was just get it done, get it done. What's the what? What's the how? What's the what? What's the how? What's the problem? How do we fix it? And as a leader and growing businesses, when I did that, my success was more limited than it is today. When I start to look at the why this is happening, why someone's showing up the way they're showing up, why results are the way they are, and asking myself questions. For example, okay, so in this particular business, web leads are down 20% for the last 3 months. So actually, that's the what. Then it's why. And a lot of times we get into pattern recognition, and I'm going to just call myself out. I get into pattern recognition and I go to the three standard things of why those leads might be down. And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Challenging ourselves or challenging people, and gracefully challenging, not putting them on the spot, asking them to find other reasons. What do you think? So when someone asks a question, sometimes now what I do is I'm just curious, what did you have in mind? What were a couple things that came up for you? What are a couple solutions you came up with? And then I listen and then, okay, interesting. And how do you feel about that? Do you think that could work? So I do a lot of the Socratic method, which we did in law school, by the way. And then interestingly, I study feedback a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
a very dear friend and client, Dr. JP Palou, has created a framework for high performing teams. High performing teams, good results with companies. And to have a high performing team, the leader is a coach, and the leader coaches two things: high care and high accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you get that is care, and most companies have the care and the leaders are more caring, and they're not quite as good at the accountability piece. The hardest part about accountability is giving people feedback. Now, here's what's interesting because I've been studying feedback for years. Kim Scott, The Radical Candor, Sheila Heen, Thanks for the Feedback, Joseph Granny, Crucial Conversations. And what I've developed is a framework based somewhat on Dr. J.P. Palou and then also an executive coach that I work with, Leslie Boyer. When I give feedback to people, I only ask questions.
Mhm.
So I'm never directive. To your point, you just tell people something. I ask them, how do you think that went? How do you think that impacted other people? How are you feeling about that? How, if you're looking back on that, what would you do differently? And it's a great self discovery tool for people rather than being prescriptive and directive.
I'll give you an example that comes quite often in our practice is as a marketing agency working with different firms, sometimes the things that we uncover is an internal issue that might be outside of the domain of marketing, but in the process of working together, it becomes very obvious. And we've definitely seen that trying to directly shed a light on that usually causes the firm to be very defensive. And
Mm,
then what needs to be fixed doesn't actually get fixed.
mm-hmm,
So we've also seen the similar approach where even though with all fibers of our being, we just want to give the client an answer. This is what you do to fix the problem. We've pattern recognition. We've seen that happen with many companies. We know what will happen. The only way to get through is to ask questions and lead them on that discovery so they can actually diagnose the problem internally and then say, yes, now we are ready to solve that. This is what we've seen as a marketing agency working with professional service firms. From your perspective in the companies that you work with and as a lawyer, is it the same with client relationships that attorneys have? Or would you say it's a different formula in that context?
great question. When we talk about challenges, whether they're internal, so if it's internal within the firm, something, a challenge that maybe we created, and the tolerance for that's very low, as we all know. We've got to really be on our game at all times. And then maybe there's a challenge. And remember, the customer's always right. And
Mm-hmm.
rule number two is remember rule number one, the customer's always right. Now, that's, as we know, that's actually not always true. Now, that doesn't mean you need to make them wrong. It doesn't mean you need to put them on the spot. It doesn't mean you need to argue with them. Sometimes the client wants something that's either not in their best interests or not possible or not ethical or not legal. And the real opportunity there for when I'm in those situations is to how to gracefully walk them through that. And sometimes I just listen because a lot of times people just need to be heard. I listen. We look at what happened or the situation that we're in, and then I'll do the same thing. Okay, so one approach is this, or this happened. We're in a situation, we're in a challenge. One idea is this. What are some other ideas? And getting them involved in the solution finding so that when we find the solution, they feel like they've had a voice, they feel like their thumbprint is on that, and they get
Mm-hmm.
through it. You know, theoretically, this all sounds good. What I will say is sometimes there are people who are difficult or challenging, and navigating people who are very set on a path or very upset or very triggered. It's a skill set. And the best advice that I can give there is to realize that you're likely in a business situation that has some personal trigger involved, and there's some personal agenda, or
Mm-hmm.
there's something going on that created this problem, whether it's internally, whether it's with a client, and sometimes just taking a breath. So Dr. JP Palou talks about SOS, stop, oxygenate, seek to understand. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just taking a pause before jumping in, stop, oxygenate, breathe, deep breath, seek to understand what's going on with this challenge, what's going on with this client. Maybe it's somebody we brawl with opposing counsel all the time. And there are a lot of people who get into litigation because they like to fight,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not pleasant people. There's other litigators who I know who are actually very lovely. So I'm not coming up with a broad label here. There are people who are litigators who are difficult people. You know, they were difficult when they were kids. They were difficult in school. They think they're really smart. They want to grind people. So learning how to deal with people like that, candidly bullies, learning how to deal with bullies. You leave the schoolyard, you get out into the world, and they're still out there.
Anecdotally, when I think about it, some of the best business relationships that we as a company had actually started on the rocky ground. And it
Mm,
is because we had to go through understanding what's actually the matter, because surely it's not personal, it's not about us. There is something else going on here. And going through that together, better understanding the client usually led to very long lasting relationships. So it's interesting how that resonates. One of the other aspects of this, I think that's important, that if you're working with somebody in one of your companies, or maybe if you're coaching somebody, not only can you ask them questions to understand what's going on and lead them to the discovery, but you can also spot what they don't know. And I think in 2026, when people of all responsibilities and in regards to any issues in their life turn to AI to ask questions, the feedback they get, because at the end of the day, it's still a machine. It answers the questions asked. It won't necessarily come up with a question that should have been asked. And I think that creates some dangers. When it comes to keep it in the business context, when it comes to leaders turning to AI to sense check themselves and asking the questions, what would you suggest as a safety rails for
mhm.
them to make sure that they don't go to the path where they're just talking to an entity that is programmed to agree with them and just lead them on to the same line of questioning?
Great question. So there's two parts to this. Before I get into the meat of the question that you just asked, AI is creating a lot of challenges in the legal industry, not just about the legal and ethical challenges of what attorneys should or should not be using AI for. And we all know those stories of the lawyers who used AI, and AI made fake cases and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's really interesting, and a lot of us are talking about this when we're at conferences and when we're going to these lunch and learns, is that we have clients who think that GPT is a lawyer, and they're sending us, instead of sending us a summary of what they're thinking, that's one page, they're sending us 6 pages that was generated by GPT. And look, we can tell it's GPT, folks. I even say, I can see you use my cousin GPT. GPT doesn't quite have my job close. What happens is we have clients feed information into GPT, and it's over generating information. And then
Mm-hmm.
as a lawyer, when a client sends me communication, I need to read every word. So the best way I train them to not do that is, one, look, I need to read every word. And instead of this being 1 pages, it was 6 pages. So you know that that's going to take more time. So that's costing you more money. Did you know that you can say to GPT to summarize what you are going to send me? And they say, oh, how do you do that? You just tell it, okay, make this 30% of what it is. So that's the first part, just letting people know, hey, AI, it's got a lot of processing power. It doesn't know how to distill things and do the things that us humans have figured out how to do, how to summarize things yet, unless you tell it. Then the question is, as a leader or just as a human, how do you not get sucked into AI being your only reference point? And that is a relatively simple. First of all, I don't ask AI questions.
Mm-hmm.
I just use it for processing and command driven. I'm very directive with my AI. I do give my AI a name, and I'm polite to it, and I say please and thank you, but I'm very directive. I treat AI differently than I would an associate or a paralegal or someone in the talent agency. So a good leader, a person who's involved in business, someone who needs to make hard decisions. And we talk about this at USC in the entrepreneurship program. You need diversity. And
Mm-hmm.
diversity is where people are from, what they think, what they believe, what their preferences are, because that's how you get different ideas and different sounding boards. So, as a leader, if you're asking AI, which has no emotional intelligence, what to do or what to think or how to show up, it's not a good idea. So what I always do is I bring people in. I bring collaborators in. And if it's appropriate, I do it internally. And then I also go to my outside network. Hey, I'm curious. Have you got a minute? I'm going through a situation right now. I unlay it. I'm wondering if you got a couple of minutes to give me your thoughts on this. There's not a substitute for human thinking, human creativity, human empathy that I don't think AI will ever have.
I think that's much needed warning to a lot of business leaders that do exactly the mistake that you're describing, that they go and they ask questions and they don't benefit from how the tool can be used, and then it just leads them astray, and it keeps them having that one view instead of having the diversity of the opinions that can generate new ideas. Ken, I want to shift gears for a second and talk specifically about deal making. And that's, of course, the area that you have a lot of experience in. And again, with the over-reliance currently, I think some emotional intelligence is unfortunately going away. And one funny indicator of that we see in the world of marketing and sales is that, and it's not, I don't think it's a generational issue, it's just a general business issue. People are afraid to pick up the phone. Whenever there is an opportunity, both on the client side, somebody much rather send a communication that's written instead of picking up the phone and actually having an answer to the question much faster and being able to move along. When you think about giving advice to business leader, to the managing partners of the law firm in the deal making, whether it's internal conversations or it's in opportunities outside of the firm, what do you think are the best practices that maybe need to be protected and reinforced in 2026?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think that as we're looking at any era from now forward, human interaction, human connection, empathy, rapport are going to be some of the best assets that people can develop and work with. And especially in an age of AI and in an age of things being able to be replicated and duplicated and cookie cuttered and pattern recognized and formulaic, and people using AI to advise how they make calls and things like that, a way to stand out and a way to build deeper relationships and a way to grow businesses is to be more in touch with humanity. And the phone, not texting necessarily, although texting can be good once you're in that zone with that person. Talking with people on the phone is epic. One step further, if you know they're going to be somewhere and it's not difficult for you to be there, don't surprise them. Let them know, oh, I'm going to be in town, or I'm going to be at that conference, or, hey, I noticed on LinkedIn you're going to this conference. That's really interesting. Maybe I'll go too. Bumping into people, having lunch with people, drinking a green juice with people, all of these things build rapport.
Certainly. I think there's also arguments being made online that face-to-face or door-to-door sales are probably making a big comeback, even not just in B2C, but also in B2B for the exact same reason, because building those connections and not necessarily invading somebody's space, to your point, obviously, just like with any communication, being respectful, but building that rapport and communication will be very important.
Yes.
What are the other aspects of, again, business and deal making do you think many businesses are getting wrong in the current era that may be an art that is being forgotten?
The art of listening, the art of curiosity, the art of creativity. It's interesting because you talked about pattern recognition, and that is a strength that I build on in order to understand things. I do my best to not build solutions based on patterns. I try to look for what is a unique way. And this doesn't mean that I have to reinvent the wheel each time, or that if my team's involved, that I say, hey, it has to be a completely novel, pioneering approach. I think it's really, really important that when we look to grow, when we look to climb that mountain in business and leadership, that we're really understanding the importance of people, of creativity, of empathy. Those are not vulnerabilities. Those are not soft spots. Those are areas where we can excel.
I think on social media, maybe
Mm,
last week, Gary V had a very tongue-in-cheek post. I don't know if you've seen it, but as you know, Gary Vaynerchuk, he's very big on empathy in the workplace.
mhm,
And on social media, he was receiving criticism that it's not very efficient. And
mm.
basically, his post went as a public apology to the CEOs that think that spending 3 minutes for empathy will have a negative impact on their profit and loss statement for the quarter, which is, of course, a really good reminder that something like this actually has disproportionate return on the time invested. To your point, it's not a weakness at all.
Definitely.
I think another aspect that I'm curious to have your thoughts on is the timing and how quickly businesses need to move. I've had the pleasure of working with businesses in different markets. I'm based in London, UK at the moment. I work a lot with American businesses. I worked with businesses in other countries. And one of the things that's very noticeable is that the speed of decision making is vastly different. My personal stance was that it's better to make a decision and try to do something because that will give additional information and I will get to where I need to be, again, being directionally correct a lot sooner because of that. Most decision is what you call a two-way doors. If you make it and then it's a wrong decision, you can mostly walk it backwards. What's your position with everything that you've seen in the industries that you worked in terms of how quickly somebody should be making the decision, where speed should be prized, and where it's actually more important to be cautious and take the additional time for due diligence or anything that might be required?
This is a great question. So I practiced martial arts for almost 40 years, and I had a sensei once, and he's two things that stood out to me is he said practice does not make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect.
Right.
And he also said you need to go slow to go fast. So when you apply those, perfect practice makes perfect and go slow to go fast, and then you apply that to decision making and the speed of decision making, there are decisions made that appear to be quick decisions where there's been a lot of processing and ideation that happened very quickly in order to make the decision. And it's hard to know for those of us on the outside observing how many people were involved in that decision, what was the process, what was the SOP they used, because there are some organizations that have readiness and they have SOPs for different situations coming up, and they have 5 different teams all processing something so that maybe an incident happens at 10 p.m. and maybe they're responding by 11 p.m. So to the outside
Mm.
world that looks fast. There was a lot of preparation that went into being ready for that situation, and there were 5 different teams working together to do that. Now, this doesn't mean that you need a large team to make decisions. Internally, we can all do this ourselves. And whether we write it down, whether we ask GPT, which a lot of people do, or if we have just a knack for, okay, so this is what's going on. How do I stop the hemorrhaging? How do I stop the bleeding? Okay, bleeding stopped. How do I stabilize the situation? Okay, situation stabilized. Okay, how do I make this situation better? Okay, situation better. Now, back to the people skills and the empathy and the curiosity and the leadership, getting people involved in this and understanding who the different stakeholders are and what the impacts are going to be. So it's a stakeholder analysis. So
Mm.
again, this can all be done in seconds in one's brain. So it might look like if someone's looking from the outside, wow, Ken, you made a really fast decision. But my brain cognitively was processing things in a different way so I could make the decision. The short answer to your question is you can't wait too long. And a lot of leaders and a lot of companies do and regret it later.
Mm.
Don't be hasty. There's a difference between haste and quick. So be as quick as you can without being hasty.
Mm. I think the imagery of a pit stop in Formula One comes to mind with your description. That something that appears almost rushed and very, very hasty actually had a lot of preparation and a lot of calculation. And again, you need to have the right people with the right tools at the right time, doing something that they practice over and over again.
Exactly.
Let's apply that specifically to the marketing. And you mentioned before that, for example, if the company comes to you and they say our web traffic is down 20%, it could be tempting to pattern recognize probably those are the causes and this needs to be done. As a more general approach to making the decisions that are thought through, but at the same time with the speed as the market changes, where do you see most of the businesses in the legal space and in professional services lagging behind where they should actually have the structures and the processes to move faster?
It's interesting. Legacy law firms do not rely on marketing very much. They have such name recognition and they have so many clients. Most big law firms that I know have more work than capability to deliver on that work. They're looking for associates. Associates are churning out. Associates are getting burned out. So because of that, they don't focus a lot. And by the way, I will say that a lot of the big firms today, I like their websites. They finally hired a branding company and they finally made things look good and it's responsive on smartphones and things like that. When we're talking about digital footprint, we're talking about lead gen, we're talking about funnel. Some of the smaller firms and a lot of the PI firms, the personal injury firms, some of these class action firms, they do a lot of
Mhm.
aggressive marketing on the web, on social media, different AdWord buys and things like that. So I'm seeing that uh, the internet came out in 94 roughly. Google made a big splash in about 2000. And I'm seeing a lot of the early adopters who are really on top of the game now. And then I'm seeing the legal profession probably trailing about 5 to 10 years. And the other thing is that we're talking about lawyers. They're smart, they're educated, their brains work differently. Although, funny enough, there are a lot of creative lawyers, a lot of left handed lawyers, a lot of musician lawyers, a lot of lawyers who love to draw and paint, which is
Mhm.
a very interesting kind of observation. So typically, attorneys don't have the inclination or the headspace and bandwidth to develop websites and ad campaigns and blasts and things like that. So the ones who are a little more astute with business are hiring agencies to help them with their websites, with their email campaigns, with their social media.
I think also to play devil's advocate in the current landscape, a lot of legacy law firms, they have tremendous reputation for doing the one thing and doing it very well for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And a lot of their book of business and referrals that they're getting are connected directly to the managing partner or the founder of the law firm. And that's working well for them until the person decides to retire.
Yes.
And then the junior, they of course would have some of that brand reflected on them. There would be some halo effect and they will generate business, but not to the same degree. And I think a lot of legacy law firms, and I'm obviously very biased here, but I'd love to have your take on it. This is almost should be part of their planning for the future to future proof their firm, because the
Hmm.
named partner that carried the reputation for the last 50 plus years will not be around forever. And of course, partly there are interesting opportunity with AI to protect the voice and the DNA of culture of the firm. But in more practical steps right now, I think they need to, a lot of smaller firms need to do a better job of generating own book of business for their junior attorneys,
Hmm.
so that when there is a change in leadership, it the firm doesn't drop off the cliff in terms of their revenue and how the future looks for them.
Hmm. So it's interesting. The dynasty firms, they're huge, huge firms. I think we'll be fine because there's just so much momentum and inertia. What typically breaks a firm is infighting amongst the partners. And that's usually, it's not necessarily the managing partner and junior associates, it's the managing partner and other equity partners. And what they start to figure out, there's a pretty common formula in firms where the money comes in and a third of the money goes to the firm, a third of the money goes to the partner who brought the business in, and then a third of the money goes to the partner who does the work. Now,
Mhm.
sometimes the same partner who brought it in is the same partner who does the work, and then they have a team of people, and then they have their own P&L. They're generating money, they've got 2 or 3 associates under them, then there's sharing of associates, then there's overhead allocations, and it starts to get very tricky over time. That model probably is open for innovation. It's worked for 100 plus years, and it probably could continue to work. I do think firms could look at new ways of doing that. And
Hmm.
what's interesting though is, again, most firms, including our own, we have more work than we have people.
Hmm.
So and we do marketing, and we're on social media, and we're on Super Lawyers, and we're on Find Law and Google and websites and other things. We don't do email campaigns. I do see some firms that do that. I don't find their messaging to be effective. That's just probably me. I do think there could be some shifts. The challenge is the managing partners have that acumen of how to create the business, and they really need hands and eyes to do the work. So
Hmm.
they're not really thinking about setting those associates up to go get work. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think there is an interesting follow-up to that because, like you said, firms that know what they're doing, they have more work than capacity to take that work. And I think not to only poke at the law firms themselves, but I think the marketing industry around legal profession and some other professional services as well need to evolve because oftentimes the association is that the marketing is to get more clients, but equally marketing can be used to establish the reputation of the company so better attorneys are joining. And then the practice is growing as well. But I think for many managing partners, marketing and building reputation to have better attorneys coming doesn't exactly stand on the same page. It seems like a very different activities, but they don't have to. You can just as well have lead generation for the talented people that will help the firm grow. And I'm curious to have your thoughts on that as well.
So everyone's in sales. And I say this at every company I've been in, anytime that I'm talking about this with leaders or managing partners, is everybody needs to understand and remember, everybody's in sales, everyone's in service. And again, I love marketing, been involved, and I actually skipped that part when we talked about my experience, but I've been a partner in a digital marketing agency. I've taught marketing before at the University of California and at USC. So I love marketing. It's my fun spot, and it's where I can get creative and where we can move levers and get results, change things, and look at SEO and look at PPC and things like that, performance marketing. So everybody at every organization is in sales, everyone's in service. The better your service is, the more referrals and repeat business you're going to get, which we all know. Now, as marketers, we don't want to hear this as much, but marketing can also support repeat referral business, and putting those campaigns together with clients can be really helpful. Customer retention and customer appreciation, and sending out informational newsletters, not just, hey, here's a 10% coupon, something interesting that people need or that they want.
Certainly. With added insight from your marketing experience as well, when it comes to maybe giving one piece of advice for the businesses in legal spectrum in 2026, what do you think is one idea that maybe managing partner needs to put on a little post-it note and have it in front of them as a reminder throughout this year?
So the biggest challenge that I hear for every firm is people recruiting. So attracting, recruiting, retaining people. They're not really having a problem with training, but retaining and keeping people
Mhm.
at firms. So look at your firm culture. Make your firm a place where people want to stay and where they want to tell their friends, hey, this is a great place to work.
I love that. Where can people learn more about your work and about different businesses that you're involved in online?
Sure. So you could find me. The best thing to do is go to LinkedIn. And if you just type in Ken Sterling USC, I'm the top result. And there's information about all the different hustles and projects that I'm involved in. And then would love to hear from people, reach out, connect, and always love to brainstorm. And I get people after these podcasts that ask me random questions, or, hey, I know this is a crazy question. Hey, there's no crazy questions. These are all good questions. And I love hearing from people. Thanks for having
Amazing.
me today, too. This has been great.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for coming, Ken.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.